to 2, where, again, if they would have won last night, that would have taken care of business. But I you'll rarely ever hear me quote Stephen A. Smith. But I'm watching this game last night, and at halftime, Stephen A. Smith said something that really stood out to me. He said that Oklahoma City was playing like they had a Game 7 in their back pocket. And Indiana, of course, they had to, was playing with the urgency that they needed to. And that's right on brand, right? It looked like one team was ready for the moment, that being Indiana, and one team wasn't, that being Oklahoma City. Just sloppy game. Oklahoma City turned the ball over 21 times. They couldn't make threes to save their lives. Like, just a very uncharacteristic game for what has been the best team consistently throughout the entire season. And now you got an even series. You got one game. Now, yes, it's back in Oklahoma City, so that could potentially play to the advantage of the Thunder, but I don't think anybody saw the series getting to this point. Sure, it's unrealistic, I think, in today's age to expect sweeps, right? Especially when you get to the finals. Because, again, both teams obviously earn their way to be there. But I think a lot of people view this as like, okay, gentleman sweep type of thing. OKC takes it 4-1, maybe 4-2, right? Which is what we were setting ourselves up for last night. But this Indiana team is scrappy, man. This Indiana team has pulled so many rabbits out of their hats, including in game number 1, that really were like, oh, okay, maybe this won't be as easy for Oklahoma City. And last night, the question going in was obviously the health of Tyrese Halliburton. After getting injured the other night and not, he powered through it in game number 5, but he was not the same, right? And that obviously affected Indiana and their ability to be competitive in that game. Last night, I don't know if it's the adrenaline. I don't know if they gave him something to help him forget about the pain, but he looked like his normal self last night, scoring buckets, distributing that. I've lost count at how many times I've seen that spinning lob pass to Siakam that he threw down for the dunk after Halliburton got the turnover and steal. Like, that was like highlight of the year type of stuff right there. And again, a huge moment in what was a great night for Indiana. The Thunder got out to the early lead, and then it was pretty much all Indiana from there. They got up to a 30-point lead at one point. I think that was their biggest margin, and just kind of managed the gap from there. And this is such an intriguing series now. It has been an intriguing series, but I don't know what's going to happen on Sunday night. I mean, Oklahoma City could go out there and maul them by 30 points, or Indiana could do what they did last night and go out there and take it from the jump and lead the entire way. I truly don't know. First, Game 7 we've had in the NBA Finals since 2016 when the Cavs came back from that 3-1 deficit. And I don't know, Game 7s are fun, right? It doesn't matter what sport it is, baseball, basketball, hockey. It's always fun, always just has that drama of everything being on the line, the entire season culminating in something like this. And again, we'll see what happens. I'm excited for it. This has been a really fun series. I didn't have a dog in the fight either way. I really didn't care who won. I just wanted to see good games, and my God, we've been treated to it. This entire, playoffs, which, by the way, with the playoffs or with the finals going to a Game 7, which will be Sunday, June the 22nd, I believe we will hit the exact 2-month mark since the playoffs started. The NBA playoffs are so freaking long. But again, they've been exciting. We've had crazy comebacks, had huge moments. Obviously, the story of Indiana, what they've done with their comebacks, and Tyrese Halliburton and all that kind of stuff has been truly remarkable and a lot of fun to watch. And, I really don't think either one of these teams is, hated outside of, maybe their divisional rivals or whatever it may be. I feel like the vast majority of people can be good with either winner, right? Maybe Halliburton rubs you the wrong way for some of his cockiness after hitting some of those big shots. But for the most part, I feel like this is going to be a widely, beloved and accepted champion regardless of who it may be. And again, you're talking about smaller media markets in in the NBA, and that was the concern going in. Yes, the ratings haven't been quite as good, but the series itself has been fun, and excited to see what happens coming up on Sunday night, and then quite literally you blink and it's into the NBA draft, which we expect to hear Colin Murray Boyles get his name called in the first round. I know that Terry and I were looking at a mock draft the other day that had Colin Murray Boyles going to the Oklahoma City Thunder, which talk about falling into a great situation if that ends up being the case. It's so interesting how they position their schedule with the draft literally taking place only days after the finals are over. There's no like downtime as opposed to the NFL where you have the end of the season, you have free agency, and then you have the draft a couple months later. But the NBA calendar, of course, being what it is, doesn't really allow for that to happen. So we'll go straight from the finals into the WNBA or into the NBA draft next week, and seeing where Colin Murray Boyles lands and where some of the future superstars of the league will end up calling home, at least for the first couple years of their career, and seeing if Dallas can screw up that number one pick. They shouldn't be able to, but, crazier things have happened, I guess. But that's what's going on with the NBA Finals. Again, last night, game number 6 with Indiana evening the series at 3 games apiece. They head to game number 7 coming up on Sunday night to see who will take on home the Larry O'Brien Trophy. So that's been going on. We also have the College World Series, which, my goodness, what a chaotic mess Wednesday night was for determining one of the teams getting themselves in the College World Series final, when the game earlier in that day was a lot more straightforward. We'll dive into Arkansas's meltdown in the 9th inning against LSU from the other day coming up next as the extra point rolls along. It's our Ed and Captain Dave along with you on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave. No Terry Ford today. He'll be back in on Monday. We've got a College World Series final set. I'm watching the SC Network right now, and they're doing their, pre-finals media availabilities as of right now. By the way, I'll let you listen to my conversation with Alan Blondin of MyOryNews.com that's out there covering the College World Series for Coastal Carolina and the fun little run that they've been on. They didn't really make it too dramatic the other day when they punched their ticket to the final, by the way. They defeated Louisville 11-3 in a pretty routine route to get themselves to the final and extend their winning streak to 26 games. But my goodness, the nightcap on Wednesday was a game that I feel like college baseball fans are going to be talking about for a very, very long time to come, as it was a chaotic mess of a game between Arkansas and LSU. And this one really swung back and forth momentum-wise. LSU holding a 2-1 lead going into the eighth inning. Arkansas jumps up and is able to take the lead at 3-2 in the top of the eighth with a couple runs there. Jared Jones hits the home run for LSU in the bottom of the eighth inning there. And so you have a tie ball game going into the ninth, and that's where things started to get really, really crazy. And here's the thing. When you are playing in a game as pivotal as this one, again, Arkansas had to beat LSU twice. So they're going to have to beat them on Wednesday, and then when they theoretically would have had to beat them again yesterday to get themselves to the College World Series final. But still, you had to get through game number one to get into game number two. And Arkansas scoring 2 runs in the top of the ninth inning gives himself a 5-3 lead. You think, okay, that might be enough. That might be enough of a cushion to win this thing. And that's when the wheels started to fall off. Get into the bottom of the ninth. Runner on first and second with 1 out. LSU still down 5-3 at this point in time. Cut number 2 here, Dave. This was the first blunder of the ninth inning for Arkansas.
This time he beats it into the ground. Aloy will go to third, and he gets the out. Did they have a chance to get 2? He went to third to get the lead runner, foregoed any chance of a double play.
Yes, they had a chance to get 2.
They're turning 2 on this ball, KP. Like, to me, this is a no-doubter. 6-4-3. I mean, look where Milam wasn't even at the runner's lane when Fahiva decides to throw this ball to third base. Look where he's at when he decides. He's not even in the picture.
Wahiva Aloy, the shortstop for Arkansas, one of the better ones in college baseball, going to be drafted very highly coming up here in a couple weeks, makes the decision with 1 out and 2 runners on to go after the lead runner at third base. Did get that out, which brought him to 2 outs. But as you heard the announcers describe there, the double play was there. Would have had time to flip it to second and time to get it back to first base, likely to get 2 outs to end the game. That would have ended the game, would have given Arkansas the 5-3 win, and they both would have been back playing yesterday for the right to go to the College World Series final. So that is the first mistake that was made. And it's one of those things that after it happens, if you're an Arkansas fan, you probably had that feeling in the pit of your stomach like, that is going to come back to haunt us. And sure enough, it definitely did, because only a few minutes later, cut number 3, Dave, this happened.
Into the fire here at Omaha. This ball is hooked to left field, and a bad read. It goes off of the left fielder's head, Davalon. Both runs are going to come in, and we are tied again. Oh my goodness, he slipped, and it looked like it went right off of his body, and we are tied at 5.
Again, that would have ended the game at that point in time. But Charles Davalon, the left fielder, misjudged, slipped, whatever you want to call it, is not able to bring in what should have been a routine catch. Ball bounces away from him, and obviously that scores the 2 runs to tie the game for LSU. And this is the point in time where the momentum is completely shifted. Everything's going wrong for Arkansas. Now it's in your head, right? Now you're thinking about all the mistakes that you've made up to this point. And as you could probably see coming from a mile away, LSU was not done in that 9th inning. Cut number 1, Dave.
Hernandez, you can see him there in the foreground. He is the winning run. He does get one to hit. It's off the glove of the second baseman, and here comes Hernandez. LSU to the finals. They pitched to Jones, and it bounced off the glove of Cam Kojal. And the Tigers are going back to the finals.
That concluded the nightmare for Arkansas in the ninth inning. The ball going off of Kozel's glove was the least egregious of those three moments in the ninth inning there, as he did leap up for it and jumped a long way. It unfortunately just did not go into his glove. That would have at least, if he caught that, forced extra innings. Who knows what happens there, but it almost just seems fitting, given all the other things that had happened, that in that moment, another opportunity to make a play, not quite enough for Arkansas, as they see LSU obviously run across there, score the 6th run, and punch their ticket to the College World Series final. And like, I don't know if you have Arkansas friends, but I recommend checking on them, because that is brutal, right? I discussed this a little bit earlier on. You know, as bad as South Carolina's season was this year, and again, historically terrible, at least in the history of them playing in the SEC. But at least with that, the emotional investment went out the window pretty quickly, right? Like you saw after a couple weeks, all right, this team doesn't quite have the horses to compete in the SEC and likely won't be making the postseason. A lot of people checked out, rightfully so. If you're an Arkansas fan, right, you always have a good team. You have a team that went into the finals with the best odds to win the entire thing. And to see it in like that, especially off the heels of a magical performance with Gage Wood throwing that no-hitter the other day, you're feeling on top of the world as a fan base. And then to see it all come crumbling down in that one inning to one of your biggest rivals at that point in the conference in LSU is devastating. That is a punch to the gut if I've ever seen one. And, of course, as you would expect, when people saw this go down the other day, it brought up really bad memories of something that only happened a couple of years ago. Cut number 4 here, Dave, when Arkansas found themselves in the final with a chance to win it against Oregon State.
Popped up. Maybe playable. Shaddy's over there. So's Gates. Tough play. Nobody gets it. Wow. An extra life for Caden Grenier. 3 guys had a chance at it. Cole, Shaddy, and Gates.
A heartbreaker of all heartbreakers. Arkansas was up in the series against Oregon State, 1-0. There were 2 outs. They were leading in the 9th inning. Pop-up goes to the right side of the field in foul territory. First base, right field, and second base all converge, and nobody's able to get it. And, again, that's kind of one of those moments that if you're an Arkansas fan watching that, probably think, ooh, that's probably going to come back to bite us. Well, it sure enough did. Oregon State wins that game and proceeds to win game number 3 and win the College World Series for 2018. So if you're an Arkansas fan, when you get into Omaha, that moment is always in the back of your mind. And then this thing happens. And this is something that's going to haunt Arkansas until they can finally get over the hump, right? And it's one thing for the fan base to be bothered by it. It's another thing when it starts to creep into the psyche of your teams, right? Because now, and look, David Horde, great coach, has obviously taken Arkansas to the College World Series multiple times, been in that finals a couple years ago. He knows how to get them there, and I'm not going to be surprised if Arkansas is there once again next season. But now it becomes one of those things where you have a program with the reputation of blowing it in Omaha. And that weighs on the coaches, that weighs on the players, and that obviously weighs on the fans. Because now, when you're Arkansas going back to Omaha in next year, whatever year it may be, you're being told, right? The conversation around your team is, man, what if they're going to blow it this year? Who's going to make the mistake this year? Who's going to be the bonehead that has a gaffe at some point late in the game that prevents Arkansas from taking home a national championship? That is like something that snowballs, right? And is that fair to the players that weren't a part of those other teams? No, but it's what the conversations are going to be, because we do this in all sports. When you have teams that have a history of choking, when you have teams that have a history of putting themselves in position to win and then shooting themselves in the foot, that compounds and that grows. And that's something this Arkansas program is going to have to deal with until they can finally get over the hump, which, again, is an even heavier burden to place on what is a tough tournament to get through in general anyway, that now they have to do this with those former team's skeletons on their back, so to speak. That being said, should Arkansas win a national championship in the next handful of years with Dave Van Horn, the heartbreak they've suffered up to this point will make the jubilation of that championship even greater, because you have the terrible memories washed away of, man, 2018, man, 2025. If they win next year, obviously you're always excited for a new national championship as a fan base. I think it's increased like tenfold, because now you've been able to get that curse, the monkey off your back, whatever you want to call it, that I think if they win can add even more excitement to an already great moment. They got to get back there. And I watched the reaction of the Arkansas players after that game on Wednesday, just tears. You know what I mean? Just having to console each other. Wahima Alloy didn't even go to the postgame presser, right? And especially for somebody that's going to be in the pros here very soon, there is a level of professionalism that, hey, as much as you don't want to, you still got to go talk to the media. That's part of your obligation. That's part of your job. But I would imagine he maybe couldn't have stopped himself from crying or whatever to even get himself to that point. So, tough day for Arkansas, fantastic day for LSU, and a fantastic series lying ahead this weekend with LSU and Coastal squaring off for the championship. Earlier on this morning, I talked with Alan Blondin of MyOryNews.com to get his insight onto Coastal Carolina and this journey, this story that they've had leading up to this College World Series final. I'll react for that for you coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head and Captain Dave with you on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Tyler Head along with you, wrapping up hour number 1 of the halftime show. Cameron Day producing on the other side of the glass. Again, appreciate Alan Blondin of MyOriNews.com for hopping in with me earlier and talking about Coastal Carolina as they get set for what they hope to be their second World Series title, second appearance in the finals, and 1-1 so far as they take on LSU coming up starting tomorrow. By the way, funny enough, when Coastal won that title back in 2016, you may not remember this. The head coach for Arizona, the team that they beat, none other than Jay Johnson. So yet another Jay Johnson versus Coastal Carolina College World Series final getting set to roll tomorrow. I believe 7 o'clock is the first pitch for tomorrow night's game, 1:30 on Sunday, and then if necessary, I believe it'll be a 7:30 game coming up on Monday if we do get to a Game 3. Time for your Friday House Subs. Text of the hour at 803-404-6100. Joey weighs in and says, Arkansas is the Dan Marino of college baseball. I'm assuming by that you mean really good but not able to get the job done. Because, of course, famously, Dan Marino went to the Super Bowl in his second year as a starter in the NFL. Didn't win that one, obviously, and the expectation was like, oh, well, he's so good, surely they'll get back there and win one day, and obviously never even returned to the Super Bowl after that. I think that's a decent comparison. And to lean into the Marino thing, I think it illustrates how hard it is to get to a Super Bowl, let alone win one, no matter how good of a player you are. I mean, look at this. Look how great Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have been in their NFL careers. MVPs left and right. They haven't been to a Super Bowl. Neither one of them has. I mean, it certainly doesn't help that you have a guy in Kansas City that's kind of standing in the way there, but it's not easy. It's not a foregone conclusion for anybody to ever make an appearance in a Super Bowl, let alone win one. I think the same thing can be said for the College World Series. Getting to Omaha itself is tough enough, right? You got to survive the gauntlet of regionals and super regionals. And then even getting to Omaha, you have to then survive and make it through multiple games, depending on how many you win or lose, to get into the finals. You obviously got to manage your staff, got to manage your 1 through 9. All those kind of things go into just being able to get to the College World Series finals. Then to win it is a whole other thing. And that leads to the heartbreak of 2018 so much for Arkansas is the fact that they were there, right? They had it. You have 3 players converging on a pop fly in foul territory that if just one of them catches it, then you have a trophy in your trophy case. But you fumble that opportunity. Then 7 years later, again, they still would have had to have won a second game against LSU yesterday, so there's no telling what could have happened. But you seemingly had an opportunity to push things further with routine plays in the field with Alloy and with the left fielder missing the pop fly, line out, whatever you want to call it, line drive, and you can't execute. And those are the ones that haunt you. And as I said earlier, now you have a reputation. Now you're the program that just blows it when they get to Omaha, one way or the other. And that's going to compound. That's going to carry. So the next team that makes it to Omaha next year, 27, 28, whenever that is, they're going to have to hear that. They're going to have to be under that microscope of, hey, the previous team screwed it up. Don't be like those guys. And that has an effect. That affects the psyche of any player, right? So we'll see what happens. But that'll do it for hour number 1 of the halftime show. Coming next in hour number 2, it's football, and more football. What do Reese Davis and Pete Thamel think of Lenore Sellers, and where do they place them in, or where do they place him, if at all, in their quarterback top 5s for 2025? It's coming up next. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Captain Dave on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in hour number 2. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave hanging out with you here on your Friday on the game. Again, Terry Ford out today. His birthday's tomorrow, so again, hit him up for happy birthday on Twitter if you get the chance to do that. He'll be back in on Monday. But it is the 1 o'clock hour. Time for football, and more football as we are only 72 days away from South Carolina kicking off the season against Virginia Tech down in Atlanta. And if you've been listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, I've been doing countdown trivia with Wes and Chris, corresponding to whatever day it is until kickoff in that year when it comes to Gamecock football. Dave, I was actually pleasantly surprised this morning when I posed what I thought might be an easy question to Wes and Chris that they both got wrong. Were you listening at the 11 o'clock hour at all? Do you know what I asked them?
No, what'd you ask?
I asked them if they knew who Williams-Brice Stadium was named after, because in 1972, it officially went from being Carolina Stadium to Williams-Brice Stadium. Do you know who Williams-Brice Stadium is named after?
It's a family of donation people.
You're close. It's more specifically named after Martha Williams-Brice, who was of the Williams family that owned the furniture company. She married Thomas Brice later on, and then after they both passed, their estate helped lead, the funding from their estate helped lead to the renovations to the stadium, and then they ended up naming it after technically her, because she was Martha Williams-Brice, but I guess technically Thomas is included in that as well.
Yeah, I've heard that story. I didn't remember all the details of it. I'm going to leave all my stuff to USC.
Okay, what's that going to consist of?
A trash can and a bunch of iPhones that are no longer work probably.
How many iPhones?
4 at this point.
4? What about the Beamer?
Oh, yeah, they can have that too.
They can have the Beamer. What's the value of the Beamer?
Right at this point, probably $6,000.
Well, I mean, what could $6,000 do for Williams-Brice Stadium? What do you think?
Put a sign or two up.
Maybe. It's a good point. Yeah. Maybe like a patch of grass.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, hopefully you're around for a long time. We don't have to come to this conclusion anytime soon.
You know, in my day they had AstroTurf there.
Yeah, well, AstroTurf was essentially just green carpet.
Yeah, green carpet on concrete.
On
I don't
concrete.
know how those guys survived that.
I've heard I've heard it's worse than being tackled on concrete, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure. It seems like, and they wore those jerseys that were mesh.
The mesh, the tearaway jerseys.
Yeah, and halfway up their stomachs.
Yeah. Yeah, those clips like George Rogers and all those guys back in the day. Yeah, you could see a lot with those things. Shoulder pads were 3 times as large.
Yeah.
What an aesthetic. Yeah, it's crazy now. If you go and touch the grass of a artificial turf stadium now, you're like, wow, this actually does feel like real grass, as opposed to, yes, just painted concrete that AstroTurf was.
Yeah, they've made definite improvements. A lot of high schools have put that new stuff in.
Yeah, it's great. No, and again, you can't tell the difference sometimes. It's amazing what technology will do. And yeah, the old Astrodome back in the day set the standard, but we've certainly come a long way since then.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank you, Miss Williams-Brice.
Yes, thank you, Miss Williams-Brice, and the Williams-Brice family for your contributions that have led to what is one of the cooler atmospheres in college football that we have over at Willie B, which will be, South Carolina plays in 72 days, but it'll be, doing my math here, 78 days until they're back in Williams-Brice Stadium taking on SC State for that first home game of the season that following Saturday. Of course, with this season upcoming, a lot of pressure on Lenore Sellers, a lot of expectations for what he's going to be in his second year as a starter. Heisman Trophy, first-round draft pick, all these kind of things being placed on the table for things he could possibly accomplish this year. Pete Thamel and Reese Davis, the other day on their College Game Day podcast, were discussing their top 5 players, top 5 quarterbacks in college football for 2025, and both of them, cut number 8 here, Dave, put Lenore Sellers very high on the list.
I'm going to go with Lenore Sellers as my 5th. Look, the combination of his growth that we've seen already, his athleticism in being able to run the ball, the skill that they're going to have around him at South Carolina, I quite frankly think their defense is going to take a step back, and that's going to necessitate him to score. There's going to be more of an onus on him to produce and to score. So I just think I picked him over DJ Lagway, and I was back and forth. I just think we've seen a little bit more from Sellers, even though he did have a little bit of injury issues last year. I think I probably like Lagway a little bit more long term, but for now I'm going to go with Lenore Sellers in my 5th spot.
I was conflicted on him as well, Pete, because I worry a little bit about their receivers. I know maybe this is year that Nick Harbor and all of that size and speed come to fruition, but there's so much, and I'm not the first to make this comparison, there's so much Jalen Hurts and Lenore Sellers. I went ahead and had him at number 4. I became convicted to put Moss at 5, and then as odd as this sounds, because this was an excruciating task, because you don't want to insult anybody and you want to kind of be right if you can be.
Sure.
I came down to this. I was like, I'm going to put Moss 5 because I think he's the wild card, and 4, I'm either going to go Sellers or Sam Levitt, and I'm going to leave the other one out. So I'm going Sellers 4, where you went with him 5.
So just there's another list of people hyping up Lenore Sellers for this upcoming season and what his potential, can be at South Carolina in your number 2 as a starter. And you heard Thamo allude to it there at the beginning that he expects the defense to take a step back. And it's not a surprising thing to say when you talk about as many guys that got drafted off the defense last year, basically half of them you are going to expect to some degree taking a little bit of a step back. Hopefully it's not that significant of a step and the defense can still be really, really good. But, last year's defense was obviously special, historic, whatever words you want to use to describe it. And being able to replicate that in back-to-back years is obviously going to be tough. And that's where the expectations get even more for Sellers, because he does have to do a lot of heavy lifting, right? And particularly early on in the season. And look, it's no secret the offensive line's been bad these past couple years. We don't know what the running back situation is as of right now. Rasul Faison may be eligible, he may not be. Now, you do have more bodies in the room now in that you've added Isaiah Gustave to hopefully quell the concern if Faison does not end up being deemed eligible, but that's still an area of concern. You're one of your, as far as pass catching guys go last year, and Josh Simon's now in the NFL. You have most of pretty much your receiving core coming back, but how big of a step forward can they take this year? We'll see. How healthy can they be? We'll also see, because you had some guys nicked up last year. So really, outside of Dylan Stewart coming off the edge, Sellers is the only known commodity that you expect to perform at a high level this year, which, again, that places a lot of expectations on him, knowing that he may have to pick up some of the slack for areas of this team that might be struggling, which, again, if you are billed to be as good of a quarterback as he's expected to be this year, you're supposed to be able to step up and do that. And I think that's where you potentially give him more credit this year if he ends up having a great season, that, hey, he's not necessarily having the complement of weapons around him that a Arch Manning has. He's not got as good of an offensive line as Garrett Nussmeier has at LSU or anything along those lines. Like, that could, just continue to show the specialness of Lenore Sellers if he's able to overcome some possible inefficiencies on this team like he did last year. Again, the offensive line was terrible. And in the last half of the season, he bailed them out so many times by making those Houdini-like plays and escaping, what would have been a lot of sacks last year. So, we'll see. Thinking about this earlier, I talked about this a little bit earlier on the 10 o'clock hour. You look at the quarterback matchups this year, and there isn't any specific game that South Carolina is going to be in where it's an open and shut that the other team definitely has the better quarterback. There's debates to be made, sure, but in a vast majority of South Carolina's games, Sellers is your quarterback advantage, right? Kyron Daniels at Virginia Tech in week number 1, And I get it. He's working with Philip Montgomery this year. They're hoping to improve that offense, but Sellers is definitely the better option. SC State, I think that goes without saying. Diego Pavia, as you know, we got his clip from the other day of how much he's circling the South Carolina game, but I'd take Lenore Sellers over him. He's a very good quarterback, fun to watch, but Sellers is unequivocally the better option there. The Missouri game, Bo Pribula coming over from Penn State, and he started for Drew Aller in some games last year, came in when Aller got dinged up against Wisconsin and let it come back, but I still don't know everything about him, right? And again, I'm going to take Sellers over him. Kentucky, Zach Calzada, playing his 12th year of college football. He's been around the block for a while, but there's a reason why he had to go down to the FCS. There's a reason why he hasn't gone to the NFL at this point in time. He's an okay quarterback, but not great. At least I haven't seen it yet. So Sellers is the better option there. It's when you get to the LSU game, that's when the first debate comes in. By the way, in this top 5 list for Reese Davis and Pete Thamel, they both also have Garrett Nussmeier on their list of top 5 quarterbacks. And he's another guy that's expected to be a first-round pick. Now, he has probably a better complement of weapons and help around him on offense that can certainly help. We saw him last year. Was he stunning and far and away the better quarterback in that game? Not necessarily. Sellers made his mistakes too. And again, there should have been another interception that went against, Garrett Nussmeier that ends up being negated with the, with the penalty, or the pick 6 gets negated via the penalty with Kyle Kennard, obviously controversial there. So you can certainly make a case. Nussmeier is maybe the better quarterback between the two, but that gap is not wide at all. And then you get to the end of the regular season with Clemson. Same thing to be said about, Kay Klubnik, who's also in this top 5 list when it comes to quarterbacks, and somebody that improved vastly last year. And, yeah, you might be able to say, okay, Klubnik is the better quarterback than Sellers overall. I'm not saying that definitively myself, but the gap isn't big. It's a tight debate to be had, certainly. But you look on the rest of the schedule, better option than Ty Simpson, better option than Austin Simmons out at Ole Miss, better option than Marcel Reed at Texas A&M. The only other one where I think you invite debate is maybe John Mateer of Oklahoma, who is, following the same path as Cam Ward, balling out at Washington State and then finding a new Power 4 home to wrap up your college career. Similar numbers. I think you actually have better numbers than what Cam Ward had at Oregon State, but Oregon State did play Washington State did play essentially a group of 5 schedule last year. So take those numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt. Obviously, Oklahoma needs Mateer to be special to get that program back on track after a couple of really tough seasons under Brent Venables. And he could end up being phenomenal. I'm going to give Sellers the benefit of the doubt at this point, though. That's going to be a tougher game this year, I feel like. But I would believe that most people would still take Sellers over Mateer based on what we know as of right now. That could change as season goes along, and maybe Mateer is a Heisman finalist for all we know. But as of right now, I think I'm taking Sellers over him. So again, the only games we really invite that debate are LSU and Clemson. And even if you say, okay, Nussmeier and Klubnik are definitely better options, it's not something that is this wide gap, certainly between the two. So feeling good when you go into any game where you have the quarterback advantage, and I feel like South Carolina is going to be able to say that a majority of the time this upcoming season. We will dive into the world of villains in college football coming up next. A coach that is on the sour list for a lot of South Carolina fans, maybe positioning himself as one of the better villains in college football. I'll tell you about that coming up next. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, along with you on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Football, and more football in the 1 o'clock hour here on The Game. Do you remember the beef between Shane Beamer and Brett Bielema? Of course you do, but in case you need a little bit of a reminder, cut number 9 here, Dave. Here's a little something to jog your memory.
And what do we have? We have an altercation of some sort down on the field. Shane Beamer is incensed, irate about something.
Brett Bielema walked across the field to take care of his injured player and taunted Shane Beamer with the substitution posture the refs do, the matching signal. He did it repeatedly. Beamer could hardly believe it at first.
Wow, Q.
He taunted Shane Beamer, and Beamer had enough and snapped. Shane just turned to me and said, "You saw what he did. You saw, I did see it."
So, of course, that was from the Citrus Bowl where, Bielema had walked across the field when one of his players was injured near the South Carolina sideline, and he was upset about South Carolina using the T-bar to their advantage on the kickoff a few minutes earlier and gave the T-bar sign to Beamer on the sidelines. And, again, we talked about this a lot coming away from that game. Like, all right, dude, I get that you're upset about what happened, but, focus on your player that's down on the field, not taunting the South Carolina sidelines. Of course, it led to, a lot of conversation coming away from that game. And forgive me, I didn't have time to pull this just yet, but Bielema addressed his relationship with Beamer following that earlier today on the Pardon My Take podcast. He said, and I quote, "I got caught up in the moment, and that one was kind of more of a little moment in the game. So I literally called him. There was later in January coach's convention. I knew his dad was getting an award, so I probably knew he was going to be there. I was going to try and make it to the event, but couldn't do it. So I called him and had a conversation, very cordial. I think you just got to get past those moments. That ended up being a rule change. So good for the game. That was actually a good thing that happened." And look, all coaches are competitors. All coaches get caught up in the heat of battle and all that kind of stuff. And these kind of things happen. I didn't expect this to lead to Beamer and Bielema hating each other's guts forever and those kind of things. It takes a lot more sinister things to happen for those kind of things to unfold between coaches in college football. But I think it's interesting, and the reason why we're bringing this back up with Bielema's comments earlier on today is Ari Wasserman of On3 wrote this article the other day talking about how coaches like Bielema are good for the sport of college football. And I agree with it. And again, the name Brett Bielema is obviously one that, puts a sour look on people's faces around here, given the interaction that he had with the football team back in the Citrus Bowl 6 months ago. But he's a coach that is a little outside the lines when it comes to what a typical college football coach is these days. And you think about the history of the sport, right? There have been so many colorful coaches over the years. Bo Schembechler, Bear Bryant, Barry Switzer, coaches that had these like larger than life personalities that obviously you talk about them for their success on the field, but also had this reputation of who they were as personalities off the field, interacted with the media and all those kind of things that I think helps add lore to this great sport of college football that we all love so much. And look, in the past handful of years, handful of decades, we've had plenty more of these type of personalities. Again, you talk about Nick Saban, who, again, was just this like machine-type perfectionist that led what was the greatest dynasty in college football for the better part of 15 years. You had Spurrier, who was here in at Florida, that was never afraid to say what was on his mind, right? You still have Mike Leach. How could I forget about Mike Leach, who said quite literally everything that came to his mind and would go on famous tangents. And, obviously those three coaches, Mike Leach no longer with us, but Spurrier and Saban have since retired themselves. So we don't have quite that personality as available as it once was. And when you look across the landscape of college football, those type of coaches that are interesting are a little bit fewer and far between, right? And when you look at the coaches that are the respective top of the sport as of right now, with Ryan Day, Steve Sarkisian, Kirby Smart, those coaches aren't quite as interesting as their counterparts of the past. Obviously successful, obviously great at what they do, and in those positions of being at the top of the sport for a given reason. Dabo is interesting from the standpoint of he can give you something goofy every now and then that, of course, we here in Columbia have a really good time making fun of him for. Again, well-deserved to be at the top of the sport given his accomplishments and all those kind of things. I'm interested to see what Bill Belichick's going to be like in college football and how that prickly personality comes across. But I as much as, again, we dislike Bielema for what he did against South Carolina, that personality and not being afraid to push back, and he's had a lot of comments in the media these past couple weeks pushing back on the idea of the SEC being a better conference. I think he had something to say about what Pavia said the other day on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. Like, it's good for the sport to have a personality like that can be very easy to hate when you're on the other side of it. And again, people here locally in South Carolina have no problem with pushing back and with, being opposed to him. But it makes the game interesting, right? And Lane Kiffin, to a degree, does his job, though I think we give Kiffin too much credit sometimes, because it's not like every time he gets in front of the microphone, something crazy is going to come out of his mouth. It happens every couple of weeks. And a lot of his interesting things happen on like Twitter and stuff, right? So he is a personality, but maybe not quite to the degree that I think we give him credit for, right? I think Beamer's a bit of a personality. He's somebody that is not always as cookie cutter with his answers as so many coaches are. So I do think that's interesting. But, if we have more coaches that aren't afraid to make people mad, make people upset, like we see with a Brett Bielema, I think that just adds layers and intrigue to the sport, right? Like, we all enjoy the sport regardless because it's football, for crying out loud. But we can have these dynamic personalities in coaches and players. And again, we talked about Pavia the other day. I still think he has to accomplish more as a player to be seen as one of those higher-end villains, quote-unquote, in the sport. The Alabama game obviously was huge, but I think you got to continue on with that in terms of being like an 8-9 win team this upcoming year to add to that reputation of who you are as a college football player, because people don't tend to look at villains from 500 teams typically. But I think that adds more intrigue and more uniqueness to the sport, right? So again, as much as we are anti-Brett Bielema because of his interaction with Beamer and that whole situation that went down in the Citrus Bowl, I can also at the same time say, yeah, I think he is good for the sport of college football as a whole. Speaking of what's good for the sport, particularly for South Carolina, is everything going on with this weekend with a ton of official visitors coming into town. And for those not familiar, the recruiting calendar has a dead period coming up starting next week. So this is the last chance before the season starts to get a lot of these guys from the 26-27 class on campus. And some of them will be making their decisions as the summer rolls along, including Landon Duckworth, the 4-star quarterback out of Alabama that had previously committed to South Carolina, decommitted, and now is in a 2-school race between them and Auburn in deciding where he's going to be playing his college football coming up in the near future. He's going to be on campus for an unofficial visit this weekend. I talked about him and a lot of other guys with Chris Clark of Gamecock Central a little bit earlier on this morning. I'll re-rack our conversation for you coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head and Captain Dave on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, along with you on your Friday. Here on the game, Elijah Campbell jumping here with me at the top of the 2 o'clock hour. Hit what's trending at 2, as well as Greatest Day in the History of the World coming up at 2:30. But it is now time for the Firehouse Subs text to the hour at 803-404-6100. Nameless texter weighs in and says, as much as I dislike Brett Bielema at this current moment, it will never eclipse the hatred I have for Dabo Swinney. I wouldn't expect it to. The Bielema thing going back to the Citrus Bowl, at the end of last year, obviously rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And he quickly shot up the villain board when it comes to opposition to South Carolina. But nobody's going to unseat your rival, right? Nobody's going to unseat the coach that tortured South Carolina for many, many years. Again, I want to say, oh God, was it either Jay or Bill maybe talking about when Clemson kind of started going on their run, and you could kind of see the trajectory of their program getting better while South Carolina was starting to fall back to earth after those string of double-digit win seasons. And it's not just the fact that your rival's going out there and winning the national championship and playing in the playoff almost every single year for a period of time, but in some cases bludgeoning you in the process, which makes it that much worse. And, again, you don't hate Dabo Swinney because he's a bad guy, because he, like all things considered, as goofy as he can be, he seems like
there's a lot of rival.
Oh, is Dabo trying to interrupt us, Dave?
Well, I was looking for that cut that he did where USC is in California.
Yeah, was that like 2011 maybe? Somewhere. It's been a while. I think Spurrier was still around when that happened. But you hate him obviously because he's the coach in the upstate, but there's also the element of, wow, he's just really good, right? And Clemson has taken a little bit of a step back compared to where they were when they were winning national championships, but they're still a really good program, and one that's being looked at as one of the favorites to make the college ball playoff this upcoming year. And that fuels that hatred when you see your rival doing as well as Clemson is doing. That's something that is never going to sit well with people at all. Dave, especially, you hate Clemson more than the average person, which is saying something, because everybody around here hates Clemson. Could anybody pass Dabo on your hated list? Is that possible?
At the moment, no.
No? Like, is there a number 2? Who is it?
Number 2. As we're talking about Gamecock football, right? Yeah,
I feel like opposing coaches.
Opposing coaches. Well, Bielema is certainly one. But I don't think anybody. I mean, I used to not like Lane.
Okay.
But then as I got to know him better, I really like Kiffin now.
Okay. Are you in he can be funny, so I'm good with that kind of thing?
Yeah, and I remember, the Muschamp game.
Yeah.
Where the Ole Miss player just ran past 3 South Carolina defenders, and you see Kiffin running down the sidelines, and he throws his clipboard.
The clipboard, yep.
Yep. I mean, that's not his fault at all.
Yeah, that's true.
That's exactly, that's our fault.
That's true. And, obviously a lot had to change after that here at South Carolina football, and obviously you're in a better place now with Shane Beamer. I don't know how many people hate Kiffin necessarily. I think maybe locally here, especially when you talk about the Juice Wells stuff, some of the recruiting battles they've had with him, I think maybe he's starting to creep up on people's list a little bit. But I still think there's a really wide gap between Dabo and pretty much everybody else, which makes sense because, again, you're talking about your rival, and a rival that has had, unfortunately, a lot of success, especially in this past decade, while South Carolina has had, its shares of ups and downs. And, look, I imagine most people in the upstate, especially after Carolina's beaten them in their home venue 2 of the last 3 years, they would probably put Shane Beamer at the top of that list of coaches that they severely dislike, or, however you want to phrase it. But appreciate the text, as always, 803-404-6100. Coming up in hour number 2, Elijah Campbell jumping here with me, and we'll hit what's trending at 2, what's going on around the sports world as we head into the weekend here on the Halftime Show on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Hour number 3. It is the halftime show. Tyler, Captain Dave, Elijah hopping in with me for the final hour once again.
Somebody's got to join you.
Yeah, so I told Dave this at the beginning of the show. It's been quite a day for people that are supposed to be doing shows with me. So I get up this morning, and of course Wes and Chris do the 11 o'clock hour with me. I was not aware there was another Shane Beamer camp. So as I'm leaving, I'm getting a text like, hey, by the way, we're at camp again today, which, like, they joined me on the phone, but that drastically alters what I had set out for the show. So I'm like, all right, got to change that on the fly. I get here, and Scott Hamilton in the Post and Courier, who was supposed to join me from 1 to 2, says, hey, I'm feeling sick.
Oh, no.
Can't hop in with you. I'll let you know if something changes. Nothing changed. I'm like, all right. Corey Parson, who does the 10 o'clock segment with me where we go over, betting odds and stuff from BetMGM, also could not join me.
Oh, Corey.
Our guy, Joe Machika, who usually does about 3 segments with me in the 10 o'clock hour, started getting sick after one segment and had to bow out. So I was low-key expecting you to be like, hey, by the way, I can't do the 2 o'clock hour. Something's come
Tyler,
up.
yeah, tore my hamstring. Can't come in.
And by the way, how is the hamstring?
I got an official diagnosis yesterday. Went to the doctor while we were off, and it is official. I tore my hamstring.
It is a tear, okay.
It is a tear. Yep, it is a mild tear, and I was told not to try running for 6 weeks.
All right.
Because that mild tear can become a significant one, and if it becomes a significant one, then you have to have surgery.
So,
I don't want to do that.
What's the difference between, like, a strain and a tear? Do you know?
Not a ton. A strain, I guess, is like pulling it. A tear means something got like detached.
Okay.
Right? Because what they were looking for, apparently I had an x-ray done, and they were looking for like a balling of the muscle.
Yeah.
Like, when a player tears their Achilles, the way they diagnose it is they basically reach for the lower calf, and if they feel the muscle balled up there,
yes,
that means it's an Achilles tear. They diagnose it pretty quickly because it's almost like a rubber band snapping.
Right.
Where once it snaps, it clumps up at the top. The hamstring's the same way.
Okay.
So if you tear your hamstring, there's going to be a little clumping, and based on the degree of the tear, because it is such a large, muscle, or tendon, based on the degree of the tear, the larger like a clump. And I was told like mine is a small one, but there's one nonetheless, and it can get worse if you don't take care of it properly.
How is it feeling as you're sitting here right now?
Feels fine while I'm sitting and when I walk, but earlier today I was like, it's felt fine today. So I got out of my car and I was going to get my backpack in the passenger seat. When I pulled into the parking garage, I'm like, you know what, let me just try to run around to see if I can do it. I tried to run around the back of the car.
Mistake.
2 steps in, felt like I got shot. I'm like, nope, absolutely not. So I cannot accelerate. I can't jog. But it's one of those, when I walk, it's fine. I feel it, but it's not like painful.
Yeah.
But I can feel it, right? But I cannot get into a sprint, a jog, really anything like that.
This is the point in the horror movie where you have to run for your life at some point, and you're not going to be able to.
Yeah, if Bigfoot walks into this building and we're all having to run, I'm the sacrificial lamb.
This is the weekend where you encounter an axe murderer. You're like, well,
right.
That's
I
it for
actually have to run to save my life. Can't do it. Running with my hand in the back of my leg or trying to just hobble the entire time. Can't do it.
Just making it too easy for him. That's part of what's trending it too. Elijah's hamstring as he attempts to recover after his softball escapade from a couple days ago.
What's tearing it too?
What's tearing
Elijah's right hamstring.
Yes, what's tearing it to? What's actually trending it to, of course, is the NBA Finals last night. Game number 6, Indiana walked all over OKC. I think because again, Indiana had not lost back-to-back games in 2 months?
Yeah.
I think it was.
One of the hottest teams since January.
Before the finals, or before the playoffs even started, and they blow the lead on Friday. They get beat on whatever day that was when they played game number 5, and then you're thinking, okay, here it comes. OKC's going to close this out. Going to be a 4-2 series, open and done with. And Indiana went out there and balled out. It's almost like, and again, I rarely ever give Stephen A. Smith credit. But what he said at halftime, I think, really reigns true. He says Oklahoma City is playing like they have a Game 7 in their back pocket. They already know they're going to have to be able to win that, to win this whole thing. Indiana's playing with their back up against the wall, as they were, and they obviously came out on top last night.
Yeah, and defensively, Indiana was so dialed in. I thought I was listening to Zach Lowe this morning, and he was really talking about how good they were on their rotations, right? And the Thunder moved the ball pretty well, but they don't move it as well as Indiana does. And what Indiana did really well last night was they rotated out on shooters. Almost every single three that the Thunder shot was contested. That's why they shot so poorly from beyond the arc.
Yep.
And offensively, when the Thunder have beaten the Pacers in the series, they force a ton of live ball turnovers. They turn those into easy buckets on the other end. I don't think the Pacers had a turnover for the first quarter and a half or so of that game. They didn't have a live ball turnover, I think, until about 30 minutes into the game, 30 game minutes into it. So you're well into the second half by the time you have your first live ball turnover. Really, the Pacers limited their own turnovers to what balls that go out of bounds, where it's a change of possession, but it's not a live ball that the Thunder have really feasted on all offseason or all postseason long. That's been their specialty.
Because that's what killed the Pacers in game number 5 was the high volume of turnovers, and now it flipped on its head. Last night. By the way, how many times do you think you've seen the highlight of the Siakam dunk in the past 12-ish hours?
Countless times. And I can't get enough of it. I can't. It is such a beautiful play. Like, the pass, I think, is overblown because Tyrese Halliburton does like to do the no-look passes where, he's absolutely looking, and all he's doing is looking at guys who aren't in the play. You're not fooling anybody with that no-look pass. That's the pass you should make.
Sure.
And all the other players you could pass the ball to are behind half court, so you can't make that pass. But to have at least the wherewithal to get it to him when he did, and Siakam catch it in perfect stride and slam the ball home, dunking it on Jalen Williams, was incredible. But that wasn't. I didn't think that was even the best play of the game. I think it was in the second quarter where they got a steal. Halliburton got a steal, was going out of bounds. His momentum was really taking him out of bounds. Kicks it out to the middle of the floor. They make about 4 passes. It results in a corner 3 from Andrew Nembhard or Aaron Nesmith. None of those passes resulted in a dribble. There were no dribbles. 4 passes. Corner 3, wide open.
Ball didn't touch the floor until after it went through the net.
And the Pacers are great with that. The Pacers were all season long really been the best team in transition in the NBA, whether it's off a live ball turnover, and you see it all throughout these playoffs. When the other team scores a basket, they are getting the ball out from underneath the net, and they're getting into pretty much a secondary transition, right? Even though the other team is running back, they still find a way to get a 3-on-2 advantage. And they're the best team in the NBA at scoring after the other team makes a basket because they just waste no time. Really, Pacers as the team name is probably the most apropos of anybody in the league because of how fast they play.
Sure.
And whether it be offense or defense. Because defense, too, man, I have to really think about in my lifetime watching playoff basketball if I've ever seen a team pick up full court for an entire playoff run. But every single time when the Pacers scored, they're picking up full court.
Is a game 7 in basketball the best game 7 there is? Because you got baseball, you got hockey, you got basketball. Which one is the best version of game 7?
In terms of absolute drama where you feel sick to your stomach the entirety of the game, I would say hockey. Just because one goal can be the difference.
Scoring is more at a premium.
Yep.
Yeah.
And possessions
baseball
are
can
so
be
tight.
the same way.
Yeah. As somebody, if my favorite hockey team has played in a Game 7 in the playoffs before. I've had a baseball team in a Game 5, a divisional series.
Yep.
I've had a favorite basketball team play in a Game 7. I think the most anxiety I've had in all of those was watching the Nashville Predators in a Game 7 against the San Jose Sharks, in 2016. That entire game, I did not feel comfortable.
Yeah.
At all. The Preds had a lead early in the game. Didn't feel comfortable.
Sure.
Anytime San Jose shot the puck, I'm like, oh, that's in. That's it. Nope. And the battles for the puck are really intense, especially if one goes to overtime.
Oh.
Last year in the Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Panthers and Oilers, when they went to overtime, I had no dog in the fight. I really wasn't cheering for one team more than the other.
Sure.
But I'm nervous watching that game.
Yeah.
Because every single shot could be the last of the season. So really, if you want to talk about just anxiety-inducing, especially if you have an emotional investment into it, I got to give the edge to hockey. I mean, it's 60 minutes of lemon booty the entire time, as our friend Langston Moore would say.
That's a good way to put it. I agree with that. I think, basketball, once you get into those final 5-ish minutes, especially if it's a tight game, that's where kind of that pressure and intensity starts to pick up. Because, again, especially with teams like this, they're just going to go back and forth, score. I hope we can get treated to a good Game 7 on Sunday. And, again, I don't have a dog in the fight either way. It's been a fun series to follow. I think Indiana surprised a lot of people by forcing it to a Game 7 at this point. And I hope we can culminate. Maybe it's another comeback. Maybe Halliburton goes out there and does something crazy to solidify what's already been an insane playoff run for him. I just hope we can get treated to a good 4-quarter basketball game, maybe even overtime as well.
Yeah,
to wrap up what's been
amazing.
To wrap up what I feel like has been one of the more highlight heavy NBA playoffs I can remember in recent memory.
Yeah, absolutely. Or at least the most unpredictable. I think that's kind of been a lot of people's beef with the NBA playoffs over the, well, really, and it's since its inception, right? Is that you can usually predict who's going to play in the finals, who's going to win.
Sure.
And even coming into this series, like the Thunder, a lot of people I expected the Thunder to win in 5, maybe 6. And throughout the entire series, too, the Thunder were favored by at least 5 points in every single game.
Yep.
But the Pacers have just done what they've done to everybody, and that's overcome odds. Like, I don't think the Pacers have been a favorite, really, with the exception of like 1 or 2 games since the Milwaukee series. They're constantly underdogs. Like the Cavs, I think, were favored in every single game in that series until some injuries stacked up late in the series. But like that's the one thing about this game, too, that even if somebody takes a 20-point lead in the third quarter, it's not safe.
Oh, it's not. No. And even especially when Indiana's down, because you're like, okay, here comes that run.
They've been doing it all postseason.
Really, until you get down like double digits in the final minute of the game, it's like, okay, I don't think they can actually come back from this. But that's kind of that's the reason why they do it a 7-game series, because typically the better team will end up winning out over the course of those games. And yeah, again, you can have a team get lucky and pull off a crazy comeback like Indiana did in game number 1, but it looked like it was trending towards, okay, here comes Oklahoma City. It's going to be a 3-1 series, and then we're going to shut the door on it in 5 games or whatever it may be. But now we're tied up 3-3. I don't know what's going to happen. Again, Oklahoma City is going to be favored going into Sunday night because you're going to be back on their home court. But if Indiana goes out there and did what they did like last night, I'm not going to be shocked by it because, again, nothing's impossible at this point.
No, absolutely not. And the thing about both these teams, too, it's not if one player has if the star player has a bad game, the other team's completely out. Like last night is a perfect example. Tyrese Halliburton didn't score 40. He scored 14.
Yeah.
He didn't have a triple-double. I mean, he had like 14 and 6 assists. Obi Toppin was the leading scorer for the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah.
Last night going into the game, if you just asked like the casual NBA fan and you said, hey, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm from the future. I'm time traveling to the past. I'm telling you, the only thing I'll tell you about tonight's game is that Obi Toppin is the leading scorer for the Indiana Pacers. You're like, oh my God, they got beat by 50 and he had to play a lot in garbage time. No, he was the leading scorer and they won the game.
But Halliburton did have a lot more of an effect than he had in game 5 when he was dealing with the injury. I don't know if it was adrenaline. I don't know if they gave him something before the game, but he did not look too hindered by whatever that injury was the other day.
No, absolutely not. Because the thing about Tyrese Halliburton that made it to where I was like, oh, maybe he is not. Maybe he is good to go.
Sure.
Was when you're watching him hound some of those guards, whether it be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or if Dort or Caruso or Williams had the ball on the top of the key. Like he moved laterally so well to where like, oh, he might be hurt, but he's not injured, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the differentiation you get once you get into the playoffs is, are you hurt or are you injured? A lot of guys are playing hurt.
Sure.
You can't really play injured or risking further injury. But last night, he looked great on the defensive side of the ball, and really that's where it started for the Pacers was, ultimately you held the Thunder to 91 points, and you're able to build a lead because you were the ones forcing turnovers, live ball turnovers, getting into the fast break, and really separating yourself after that.
Game number 7 coming up on Sunday to decide who'll take on the Larry O'Brien Trophy for the 2025 season. Also this weekend, the College World Series final between LSU and Coastal. And boy, Wednesday was a wild ride getting to those final 2 teams. We'll dive into that coming up next as What's Trending at 2 continues here on the Halftime Show on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Elijah Campbell, Kevin David hanging out with you here on your Friday for what should be a fun sports weekend. As I have a couple different champions crowned. Of course, we talked about the NBA Finals and somebody taking on the Larry O'Brien by Sunday night. And either Sunday or Monday, we're going to see who's going to claim the College World Series National Championship for baseball after a chaotic Wednesday out in Omaha that set the table for LSU and Coastal Carolina to play in the finals this upcoming weekend. And it all culminated, cut number one here, Dave, with a walk-off by LSU against Arkansas.
Hernandez, you can see him there in the foreground. He is the winning run. He does get one to hit. It's off the glove of the second baseman, and here comes Hernandez. LSU is on to the finals. They pitched to Jones, and it bounced off the glove of Cam Kojal, and the Tigers are going back to the finals.
That ended what might be the most disastrous ninth inning of baseball I've seen in a long time for one team. Arkansas had ample opportunities to close that game out. Now, yes, they still would have had to play a second game yesterday. Who knows what would have happened? But still, you keep yourself alive. And my goodness, mistake after mistake after mistake. Even on that last play, the ball went off the second baseman's glove. He had to jump for it, so I don't put as much of that on him. That was a tougher play to make. But Alloy misses on what should have been a double play with one out and two runners on. And then the left fielder slipped, misplayed it, however you want to describe it, lets the ball drop. That scores the 2 runs, tie the game. Then you have that to round it out. Check on your Arkansas friends. They are not okay right now.
Oh, man. I really hope that enough adults in that program did not allow any of those players to be on their phones after the game. Don't go on the internet. Don't. Absolutely not. That's some of the best advice I think I could possibly give those players in that situation, because that was a meltdown.
Yes.
That was nothing short of a series of self-inflicted wounds that caused you to have your season end prematurely. Whether it be, I have a hard time going back and forth in my head at which play was worse between the left field drop that we just heard, or Aloy, having a clear double play. If he just looks to his left, you see that angle from the outfield, where you can see where the runner coming from first was, and that's bang bang, you win the game, right? Like the game ends right there, and it doesn't even get into an opportunity for your left fielder to, trip over his own feet, misplay the ball, whatever happened to cause that play, but you created your own bad luck, right? Like you hear the saying all the time, like you create your own luck. You can also create your own bad luck if you allow a team like LSU just to hang in there and hang in there. Bad stuff's going to happen if you allow a team to hang around who shouldn't be hanging around with you when you have opportunities to close the door.
And, of course, this brings up the memories of the 2018 College World Series final where Arkansas drops a pretty routine pop fly in foul territory that would have ended the series. They would have won the World Series if they catch that. Instead, Oregon State comes back to win that game and proceeds to win game number 3. And I went back and pulled that clip if you guys want to use it later. But
oh, absolutely. It's going to be part of a montage, I'm sure.
In watching back that moment and then watching what happened the other night, I believe it was after the left fielder dropped the ball, Dave Van Horn's reaction was the exact same. He's kind of leaning on the edge of the dugout and kind of puts his hand over his mouth. Literally the exact same thing, almost like mimicked perfectly from what happened back in 2018. That is his bleep, I guess, reaction.
That is, I don't want to know what happens the rest of this game.
Yes.
Especially someone like Dave Van Horn, who this was his 23rd season coaching this Arkansas team. He's been a baseball lifer. Guys who have been in this long enough know exactly what it means when you don't put a team away like that.
Yep.
When you just allow more stuff to happen, you open the door for randomness, you open the door for more mistakes, and mentally you're just more prone to make those mistakes whenever in the back of your head before the next pitch happens, you're thinking, I just cost us a win. Like that I could have ended it right here. We're about to throw another pitch. We should not be throwing another pitch because I didn't communicate on that pop fly, or I didn't make the play to turn two, a shortstop like Aloy's been making his entire career, right?
Yep.
That lingers in your head. Whether players want to admit it or not, it's hard to move on to the next one when the previous one is what could have ended the game when there shouldn't have been a next one.
Of course, Alloy's going to hear his name called in the upcoming MLB draft coming up here in a couple weeks' time, and is expected to be a first-rounder. But as he's meeting with scouts leading up to that, that's going to be the first question. Hey, what were you thinking there?
Well, yeah, what happened?
Yeah, what happened? Why did you do that?
Because I mean that's going to be part of the evaluation. Like you're going to be in big games if you are lucky enough to get called up and play in the big leagues. A team's going to want to know if they can rely on you not to go brain dead whenever the ball gets to you and there's a double play chance that you could have won the game with.
So if you're our shortstop in Game 7 of the World Series, you're in that scenario again. You're going to make that same mistake?
Yeah.
You can't have that.
Are you learning from this?
Are you learning from this? Yes.
For his sake, I hope so. For his sake, I hope he's able to put that behind him and end up having a really good career, because you'd hate for that to be what mentally breaks somebody, especially in a sport like baseball, man, where you see guys get the yips and just never become the same, right? Like Rick Ankiel. Highly touted prospect as a pitcher, comes in a big game and can't not only find the strike zone, he can't find home plate.
Yeah.
Like he's pitching the ball to those eating hot dogs 2 or 3 rows up, and he never pitched again. Now, thankfully for him, he salvaged his career by being a really good outfielder and being able to use the bat. But that's one of those things when it's going to haunt those kids for a long time. Disastrous is probably even underselling how bad that 9th inning was for them.
So that sends LSU to the College World Series final. They will take on Coastal Carolina, who's been on an absolute tear, 26 straight wins to get themselves to their second bid in the College World Series final. Cut number 7 here, Dave. This is Kevin Schnall talking after their victory over Louisville on Wednesday, saying, the reality hasn't really hit them yet.
It really hasn't hit me yet. I'll be honest. I'm still trying to digest that game. I know we're going to the World Series finals, and whoever wins 2 out of 3 brings home brings home a national championship. So no, it hasn't really hit me yet, because one of my maybe flaws is I'm rarely satisfied. This is satisfying, but I'm not satisfied yet. And, these next 2 days are really critical if we're going to win a national championship.
I talked about this with Alan Blondin, who covers Coastal for MyOriNews.com a little bit earlier on today, because we've seen it here at South Carolina. When you move on from the legendary coach to the longtime assistant, there's no guarantee success is going to come. Chad Holbrook never got South Carolina back to the College World Series, which is why he was moved on from, and they hired Mark Kingston. So for Schnall, who I think it was like 20-plus years, he was the assistant under Gary Gilmore, there's no guarantee that success is going to continue. And to be back in the finals in his first year, hat tip to you, sir.
Absolutely. And especially considering where they were the last couple years. I mean, they were good, but they weren't
great.
This,
yeah,
right?
They weren't this.
Yeah, and the way they operate is so advanced. I love listening to him talk. He was talking earlier in the week about the keys, like what they emphasize on, and they are so big on the freebies, like taking walks, getting hit by pitch.
Leads the nation in that category, by the way.
They get hit by pitch on 6% of their plate appearances.
That's insane.
Like, it may sound like a low number, but when you just look at like look in the majors or even in college, where hit by pitch is a much bigger part of the game, they excel in that better than everybody. They do so many of the little things so well. I saw it was like an infographic, and it was catcher Caden Bodine, where all the pitches he's had this year that have been called strikes that were out of the zone.
Yep.
And it's amazing how many pitches he's able to frame as strikes. And that's a small detail, right? That is a small detail in a game that is filled with small details, but they master those small things well.
And he is a rare breed today because he calls the game himself from behind the plate. That is not as prevalent today because you have pitch com and all that kind of stuff, but Bodine calls the game from behind the plate. And again, hats off to you, because it's been a phenomenal pitching staff, second in the nation in ERA, led, of course, by the former South Carolina pitching coach, Matt Williams.
Yeah, I know it doesn't feel good for South Carolina fans to see this Coastal team make a run and Matt Williams be the pitching coach too. But, I mean, really what I've kind of realized over the course of the last month and a half or so, when you see Coastal doing what they've been doing, and you see the regression from the South Carolina pitching staff, specifically a lot of the guys that were here last year, you realize Matt Williams did a lot of good with that pitching staff. And he did a lot with guys that when they would get a new pitching coach would regress the way that they did.
Sure.
I think that the regression in Carolina's pitching staff, South Carolina's pitching staff this year, really kind of shows you, Matt Williams' effectiveness as a pitching coach. And you see what he's done in year one in being second in the country in ERA and being able to have this operation moving as well as it is. And it helps to have that catcher who's able to be a master at framing pitches. Really, I mean, it highlights a lot of the value that Matt Williams brings.
Yeah, I don't know if South Carolina would have been top 5 in ERA this past season if Matt Williams is the coach, but they certainly probably wouldn't have been worse than what they were, which again was historically bad from a program standpoint.
And, and all the guys that had certain benchmarks in the previous year and then just fall back on those this year, even if it's marginal, which a lot of it wasn't marginal, and you saw that in SEC play. But Matt Williams deserves a ton of credit in this, too, the way he's been able to go in there and in year one be able to have a pitching staff that makes you feel good about them competing with LSU, who has arguably the best 1-2 pitching combo in the country. And that should be usually in every other year when you get to this point. That 1-2 pitching combo usually gives you an edge, but I don't know how much of an edge it gives you whenever Coastal's got a complete rotation.
Game number 1 coming up tomorrow afternoon, and of course it's best 2 out of 3. If you win 2 games, you win the whole thing. Game number 3 only necessary if they split the first 2 games coming up on Monday. We'll hit greatest day in the history of the world coming up next as the halftime show rolls along here on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler, Elijah, Captain Dave wrapping things up on your Friday here on the game. It is time for the greatest day in the history of the world. We'll start off, not going back all that far. This day back in 1993, the Bulls completed their three-peat in the NBA Finals. Who made the last three-pointer with just under 4 seconds to go to seal the game in their victory over the Suns?
Would that be John Paxson?
That would be John Paxton. Three-pointer with 3.9 seconds to go to elevate the Bulls 99-98 over the Suns.
And then I think in I can't remember which finals it was part of the next three-peat. Steve Kerr had a very similar shot.
Yep.
But there was at least one game in each of those three-peats where one of those role players caught a pass, and I believe both of them might have been from Michael Jordan, where he had the game-winning assist on those. Those don't get as much love as the game-winning shots, but the game-winning assists and making those plays equally as valuable.
And to no surprise, Michael Jordan ends up winning the Finals MVP for the third time in a row as well, which obviously is a record in and of itself. And the question, of course, becomes, if he does not step away from basketball, what happens in those middle 2 years?
Man, that's always a really good question. That Rockets team that did end up winning one of those two finals with him being gone, or actually won both. Yeah, that Rockets team that went back to back was really good, and that was the prime of those teams.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh man, that's always a tough question to answer, because assuming the Bulls get out through the East, I think they would have. Do they beat that Rockets team? I mean, because the Rockets would have an advantage, the forward position, the Hakeem Olajuwon. I would go on a limb and say they don't win both of those. I say the Rockets probably split with them. We probably have 2 straight Rockets-Bulls finals, and the Rockets are splitting with them.
So you're saying that Jordan would have an extra title, but he would also have a loss.
He would have a loss.
That's the argument people make, and I don't get into the LeBron Jordan thing. I think it's silly discourse at this
so
point.
Played out,
but he never lost in the finals. So you're saying theoretically he would have at least one finals loss.
Because I think they would have played a team that was as good or on their level. I mean, because you look at all the teams they beat in those 6 championships, whether it be the Blazers nowhere near as deep. Clyde Drexler was great, but they were nowhere near as deep. The Jazz teams in the late 90s, obviously Stockton, Malone, 2 Hall of Fame players, nowhere near as deep as those Bulls teams were. That Rockets team, I would say, was equally as deep. And when it comes to the LeBron thing, LeBron, and most of his finals was playing against teams that were better than him, but
sure.
07 against the Spurs, that was a much better, deeper team. And winning championships in the NBA, you have to have the better version of role players.
I mean, he carried that Cavs team.
He did
to the finals. That was kind of a Cam Newton-esque type of. Without LeBron, how good would this team actually be?
Right, your second best scoring options are guys like Anthony Parker and Daniel Gibson. Was a role player that helped them get to that finals that year. But that Mavericks team was deeper when the Mavs Heat. That Spurs team, both years, even the one that the year that Miami won, better and deeper. So, I mean, I would say, and then, of course, those Warriors teams, not many teams are beating any of those Warriors teams.
By the way, real quick, where do you fall on the he actually wanted to play baseball or they suspended him for gambling with the Jordan conspiracy?
I think that one's tough. I don't buy that one as much. In terms of the NBA conspiracies I subscribe to, I would maybe put that one several notches below the frozen envelope.
Oh, yeah.
That one is the one I am convinced is real. I am so convinced that one's real, it's not even funny. That's a David Stern type thing if I've ever...
I think most people would agree with that. That's probably like the number one conspiracy I think most people in the NBA probably believe.
Have you ever heard the Shaq story? Where apparently before the lottery, when Shaq was the prize prospect, David Stern, and Shaq has said this, David Stern asked him, like, cold weather or warm weather? And Shaq told him he likes warm weather. And sure enough, the Orlando Magic won the draft lottery.
How about that, man?
So it's one of those things where, I could totally see David Stern making it to where
David Stern understood what would help the league as a whole.
He was a businessman. Yeah, he was a very good businessman. And I think that the frozen envelope theory probably is the most probable because they just did the lottery so differently then too. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they stuck that Knicks envelope in a freezer for 5 days and then put that in with everything else, and he knew which one to pick up, which one to leave alone.
More of the greatest day in the history of the world, 2004. Listen to this. Ken Griffey Jr. hit his 500th home run as the Reds beat the Brewers 6-2 in Great American Ballpark. With this stinger, he also tied his father's career hit mark with 2,143. This occurred on Father's Day with his dad sitting in the stands.
Yep, I still vividly remember that. My favorite baseball player of all time. I was pumped. I remember for days leading up to that being like, man, he's almost to 500, almost to 500. Now, I didn't. The part that kind of jogged my memory there was the tying his dad for total hits.
Kind of
I always forget about that part. It's the secondary one,
right.
yeah, because home run number 500 is a pretty big deal.
Sure.
But in the fact that Ken Griffey Jr., with all the injuries he got when he got to Cincinnati, which, of course, that's when he was going to get those injuries, this is when he starts playing for my favorite team. If he didn't miss some years, man, he's one of those guys that, like, it's not a big what if because he still is a Hall of Famer,
Sure.
a transcendent player. But it's one of those things where the what if is, could he have gotten to Hank Aaron's record around the time Barry Bonds did if he never had to miss a couple of years? I mean, he missed one entire year because of an injury that he sustained during the offseason.
He is a great player, Hall of Famer, well-deserved and all that kind of stuff. But you're right, that what if is like, could he legitimately have been the greatest of all time?
Yes.
I think is where the question becomes.
Because not a lot of guys that are Hall of Famers do you look back and say, well, what if, you know.
Like, oh, there's so much more they could have done. Like, no, with him, if he stays healthy, definitely.
Right. Especially when it comes to injuries. Like, guys like Grant Hill, right? Like, Grant Hill still, I mean, he made it into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, and a lot of that's because of what he did at Duke. But that's a guy that when he got to the NBA was so good, but then he had a couple of really bad injuries. And it's one of those, if Grant Hill never has those, maybe we're talking about Grant Hill as being one of the 75 best players, right? When we did the 75 NBA 75 for the league's 75th anniversary,
sure,
we're probably talking about Grant Hill on that list. I think that's one of the biggest what ifs to me in sports, is if that never happens to him. People talk about Derrick Rose, and I absolutely see that too. But the one that, like in basketball, that really gets me is Grant Hill. But we're talking about, he could have been like Hall of Fame just on his pro career alone. With Ken Griffey Jr., Hall of Famer, but it could have been more. He could have compiled on a lot more in terms of his stats, or he was never going to win a World Series with that Cincinnati team. But in terms of what he could have done on all-time leaderboards is a legitimate question, because he had a lot of really bad injuries that kept him out for a lot of time whenever he was in Cincinnati.
Last one here, 2006. Heat come back from being down 2-0 to the Mavericks in the NBA Finals, winning 4 straight, beat the Mavs 95-92 in game number 6. Dwayne Wade averaged 39.3 points over that 4-game run.
Well, that's one of the best NBA Finals runs individually that we'll ever see. And that was such a good series, too. And remember, they lost the first 2 games of that series.
Yeah, down
in
0-2.
Dallas.
Yep.
This was back when they still did the 2-3-2 format. So they go down 2-0. They go back to Miami and win 3 straight, and now they have to steal one in Dallas, which they couldn't do previously. And that was such a good game. That Heat team, too, another one of those. Like, yeah, the star player is going to matter a lot, and it clearly did when Dwayne Wade scoring 39 points a game. But Jason Williams had a really good series. Gary Payton played a really key role on that team. Like, there were a lot of really good role players. Adonis Haslam was a really good role player. I mean, that was one of those, that team was really, really good. And that was one of those that Pat Riley stepped in and coached. I mean, they had Stan Van Gundy as the coach for a while, and they kind of hit roadblocks when they got into the playoffs. Pat Riley takes over. They have the secret juice, and Dwayne Wade goes for 39 in that series. And, man, that was a really fun basketball team. And that was an all-time series for somebody who was in their 3rd year in the league, too. I think that was one of the more astonishing things at the time when I look back and remember it, that this was still very early in Dwayne Wade's career, and he had that transcendent playoff run that ends up separating him.
There's your greatest day in the history of the world, June the 20th. We'll hit our Firehouse Subs text of the hour. Also find out what's coming up on the post-game show as we wrap up the halftime show up next here on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Elijah Campbell, Captain Dave wrapping things up on your Friday before we hand things over to Elijah and Jay for the post-game show. I mess up show names constantly.
Oh, Jay does it all the time. Don't feel bad.
Well,
Jay calls our show the halftime show all the time.
I also host like 8 shows on this station. So
See, you have a valid excuse.
I do have a valid excuse. We were just talking some Braves there with Jay in the break. Chris weighs in on the Firehouse Subs text line. Keep chopping and hoping, Braves Nation. Well done for sweeping my Mets. Congrats. You're only 10 games back now.
I love Chris's backhanded compliment. And because Chris will chime in. He's a Mets fan. I see his texts all the time. He's a loyal Mets fan, which God bless you. Can't be the easiest thing in the world to be.
Sure.
But the Mets are slipping right now too. I mean, they have
six in a row.
6 in a row.
6 in a row. Don't look now. You're tied with Phillies for the NL East lead. So don't concern yourself with us as much as holding on to your divisional lead.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. The NL wild card is going to be really interesting. It is a cluster of teams. I think the Dodgers should still end up winning that division, but the Padres and Giants are really good. Obviously now the Giants picked up Rafael Devers. That changes how we view their bats a little bit.
As long as he doesn't, go drama queen on him.
Exactly, right. You know what's crazy though with the Giants? And I didn't realize this until my dad told me when I was on the phone with him on Sunday. Giants haven't had a player hit more than 30 home runs in a season since 2004.
Wow.
And some fella named Barry Bonds was one who did that.
Even in those last couple of years, Barry never hit more than 30? That's hard to believe.
2004. I'm telling you, 2004 was the last time that the Giants had someone hit over 30.
Speaking of West Coast teams, did you see what went down with the Dodgers and Padres last night?
That game had a lot. There was the testiness, the nastiness, and Yamamoto getting robbed of an immaculate inning. There was a lot that went down in that game that was really notable.
Fernando Tatis getting beamed. Apparently that was the 3rd time he's been hit by the Dodgers. Of course, the payback comes to Shohei Ohtani later in the game. I don't know about you. I hate the unwritten rules of baseball.
I despise them.
Oh, that guy's having too much success against us. Better hit him. No. How about you play better? And stop allowing home runs or whatever. That's on you, buddy, not him.
Maybe call me new school, but I don't like just giving somebody a free base because my feelings are hurt.
Exactly.
I think it's just a dumb strategy.
Do you remember a couple years ago when, the Marlins would hit Ronald Acuna every time he came up to the plate? That was the thing, for one, you suck. 2, be better, and he won't keep hitting home runs against you.
Well, because I can't remember the year it was, but Jose Urena hit him with the first pitch of the game because Ronald was hitting leadoff.
Yes.
And your starting pitcher gets ejected. First pitch of the game.
Yes.
What good does that do you? But you're putting Acuna on base, who, mind you, stole 70 bases in a season, and then your pitcher gets ejected.
When you're a crappy organization, you're not playing for anything, I guess you can just go out there and do whatever.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I just never understand it. I mean, I know it's one game of a 162-game season. You feel like you can maybe throw some pitches away, but you just never know when you maybe need a game or two, and a game or two could be decided in a one-run game because you put somebody on base when you probably shouldn't have because you were mad about something.
Yeah, again, it's stupid. Unwritten rules of baseball. I will never be on the side of that. By the way, Don Mattingly is one on my list of punchable faces in all of sports because he was at the helm of the Marlins when that was happening, and I was every time they'd show him in the dugout, I'm like,
you suck.
Right in the face. Right in the face.
I would love to compile a list of the most punchable faces in sports over the last 25 years.
Mattingly's up there.
I think Grayson Allen for fans is probably going to have number 1.
Yeah, that's a hard one to beat. Eli Drinkwitz is up there. Maybe that's more regional here, but he's definitely he's the guy that tells the teacher about the homework right before class ends
and is ratting it out, ratting it out because nobody else did it. He did it. Nobody else did. Yeah. He knows it too.
Is Ryan Day up there? Does he have a punchable face?
I think the state of Michigan is yelling, into a void right now, saying yes.
You might get your hand turning black from all the Just for Men in his beard.
There's a lot of it.
Punch him in the face.
There's a lot of it. That's a dark beard and dark hair, brother.
Thanks for hanging out. What's coming up next?
Coming up next, our boy Mitch Light from the Athletics going to preview the College World Series final and answer the question: who is the more cursed baseball program between Florida State and Arkansas?
Good debate.
And Cale Wilson's going to talk 7-on-7 with us in the next hour.
That's up next. Post-game show with Jay and Elijah on your Friday here on The Game.